Stop waiting. Start becoming. Welcome to Becoming with Beck, the podcast for those ready to shift their mindset, lead themselves, and manifest intentionally. If you know you're meant for more, you're in the right place. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to Becoming with Beck. I'm your host, Beck Robinson, and thank you so much for joining me today. Now, in the last episode, we spoke about self-trust. We explored how learning to trust yourself again is the foundation for becoming the version of you who has the life you want. But today, I want to take that one step further because self-trust is important, but what you do with that self-trust is what actually shapes your life. And that comes down to something that most people don't talk about. I want to talk about standards because the truth is you don't get what you want, you get what you tolerate, and what you tolerate becomes your normal. And I want you to really sit with that because this is one of those truths that can feel a little uncomfortable at first, but not because you're doing anything wrong. It's because it invites you to take ownership. And ownership is powerful. Because the moment you realize that your standards are shaping your life is the moment you realize you can change them. So today, we're going to go deeper into this, what standards actually are, how they're connected to your identity, where they might be showing up in your life right now, and how you begin raising them in a way that feels aligned, not forced. So, when you hear the word standards, you might think about expectations for other people, standards in relationships, standards in friendships, standards in what you will and won't allow from others. But standards go much deeper than that. Your standards are not just about what you expect from others. They're about what you accept for yourself, what you walk away from, and ultimately the life you create. But there's another layer to this that I think is really important to understand, and that's the idea of becoming a match for what you say you want. Because manifestation isn't just about asking for more, it's about becoming the version of you who naturally aligns with more. A lot of people say they want more money, more success, a healthy relationship, opportunities. But when you look at their standards, their decisions, and their identity, they're still operating from a version of themselves that can't hold these things. You can't expect to receive something while staying the same because life doesn't respond to what you ask for. It responds to what you are available for. Becoming a magnetic match means your standards reflect it. Your behavior reflects it. Your energy reflects it. Your identity reflects it. So if you say you want a healthy relationship, but you tolerate inconsistency, lack of communication, and being undervalued, you're not a match for that relationship yet. If you say you want success, but you avoid responsibility, stay in your comfort zone, and don't follow through, you're not a match for that version of you yet. And that's not judgment, that's awareness. And this is why standards matter so much, because your standards are what create that match. When you raise your standards, you naturally begin to shift your identity. You make different decisions. You walk away from what no longer feels aligned and you start showing up differently. And over time, you become someone who can naturally hold the life you say you want. And your standards aren't just shown in big decisions. They show up in the quiet, everyday moments. The way you speak to yourself when something doesn't go to plan. The way you respond when something feels off, but you ignore it. The way you show up for your goals when no one is watching. the way you treat your own time, energy, and well-being. Your standards are the baseline for your life. They quietly set the tone for what you experience, what you allow, what you continue to participate in, and over time, they become your normal. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because most people don't consciously choose their standards. They inherit them from past experiences, from relationships, from family dynamics, from environments where certain behaviors were normalized. Maybe you grew up seeing people settle. Maybe you experienced inconsistency and learnt to accept it. Maybe you were taught to prioritize other people over yourself. And over time, those experiences shape what feels familiar. And what feels familiar often becomes what feels acceptable, even if it's not aligned. Your standards are a direct reflection of your identity. Not who you say you want to be, but who you believe you are at your core. Because identity drives behavior, and behavior reinforces identity. It's a cycle. If you identify as someone who isn't worthy of more, you will unconsciously accept less. If you identify as someone who struggles, you will stay in situations that reflect that struggle. If you identify as someone who avoids conflict, you will tolerate things that require a boundary. And this is why people can want more but not experience more, because their standards are still aligned with their current identity, not the identity of the person they're becoming. Your life will always reflect the standards of the identity you hold, not your goals, not your vision board, not your intentions, your standards. Now, low standards don't always look obvious. They're often subtle and they're often justified. They can look like staying in situations that don't feel aligned, but telling yourself, oh, it's not that bad. Over-explaining your needs because you don't feel fully comfortable standing in them. Accepting inconsistency and calling it being understanding. Doubting your intuition and looking for reassurance outside of yourself. Putting your own needs last because that's what you've always done. And sometimes low standards don't feel like what you tolerate from others. They look like what you tolerate from yourself. Not following through on the things that matter to you. Breaking promises you made to yourself. Speaking to yourself in ways you would never speak to someone else. And again, this isn't about judgment. It's about awareness, because awareness creates choice, and choice is where change begins. There comes a moment in your life where something shifts, where you realize wanting more isn't enough, because you can want a better relationship, a more aligned career, more confidence, more fulfillment, but if your standards don't match that, your life won't either. And this is where the real shift happens, from wanting to expecting. Because when you expect more, you move differently. You decide differently. You no longer negotiate with things that don't align. And that doesn't come from ego. It comes from self-worth. It comes from recognizing I'm allowed to have a life that feels aligned. I'm allowed to choose something different. I'm allowed to outgrow what no longer feels right. And this is something I've experienced in my own life. I remember a moment where I caught myself accepting something that didn't feel right. And instead of speaking up, I almost convinced myself to stay. And if I had this thought, if I stay here, I'm reinforcing the version of me that settles. And that was the moment everything shifted, because it wasn't about the situation anymore. It was about who I was becoming. Now, raising your standards doesn't mean your life changes overnight. It means your decisions start to change. It starts in small moments. The moments you choose to listen to yourself instead of dismissing how you feel. The moment you say no to something that doesn't align. The moment you follow through on something you said you would do. These moments might seem small, but they are identity shifts in action. And as you begin raising your standards, you'll notice something. It can feel uncomfortable because raising your standards often requires letting go of what's familiar, setting boundaries, having difficult conversations, choosing yourself even when it feels hard. And this is where people often go back, not because they don't want more, but because the discomfort of change feels unfamiliar. This is where your nervous system comes in, because your nervous system is wired for familiarity, not necessarily alignment. So if you're used to certain patterns, even if they don't serve you, they can still feel safe. So when you start raising your standards and choosing differently, your body might respond with doubt, guilt, uncertainty, second guessing. And it's easy to interpret that as, maybe this isn't right for me. But often it's just your nervous system adjusting to a new level. You're expanding. You're stepping into something new. And your body is learning that this new standard is safe to hold. And this is why raising your standards isn't about forcing yourself. It's about supporting yourself through the change. And you don't need to control everything either. Now, something else that's really important in this process is learning to hold a level of trust, even when you can't see the full picture yet. Because when you start raising your standards and stepping into a new identity, there will be moments where you don't know exactly how it's all going to unfold. You might not know when it's going to happen. You might not know exactly how it's going to come together. And this is where a lot of people slip back into old patterns because they start trying to control everything. They overthink it. They question their decisions. They look for constant reassurance. But something I've learnt in this, you don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to control the timeline. You don't need to force the outcome. What matters is that you stay anchored in who you're becoming. I don't have to worry about the when or the how. I just have to stay locked into my own energy. And when I say energy, I mean my standards, my identity, the way I show up, the decisions I make. Because when you're aligned with that, life has a way of meeting you there. Not always in the way that you expected, but in the way that matches the version of you you're becoming. You don't manifest by controlling every detail. You manifest by becoming someone who trusts themselves enough to keep moving without needing to see the whole path. The more you raise your standards, the more you build self-trust. Because every time you honor yourself, you send a message, I've got me. And that changes everything. Because you stop looking outside of yourself for permission. You stop needing constant reassurance. You start trusting your decisions, your boundaries, your direction. And from that place, your life begins to shift naturally. Now, I want you to sit with this. Where in your life are you currently accepting less than what you say you want? And be honest with yourself here. Is it in your relationships? In your career? Is it your habits? Is it the way you speak to yourself? Then ask yourself, what would it look like to raise my standard here? Not perfectly, but intentionally. And then one more question. What is one decision I can make this week that reflects the person I'm becoming? Your life doesn't change when you want more. It changes when you require more. When you decide, I'm no longer available for what doesn't align, because your standards are the bridge between who you are now and who you're becoming. Now, there's a quote that instantly comes to my mind that says, ask for more. The universe isn't on a budget. So be delulu in your wants and your desires, then take on that identity. You don't get what you want, you get what you tolerate. So the question is, what are you no longer available for? And are you ready to act like it? Thanks for listening to Becoming with Beck. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram at Becoming with Beck. And if you're enjoying this podcast, don't forget to follow and leave a review. It really helps support the podcast and reach more people. I'll see you in the next episode.